Hello, YouTube. Geo Scholar here, reporting to you live from my recording studio. I added a lampshade. I'm in the process of trying to fix up my recording place. Got some coffee here. It's nighttime. Figured make a video. I'm currently working on a video about Oklahoma. I'm in the beginning processes of. I'm gonna have a video about Oklahoma's geography coming pretty soon. Hopefully, it'll be by the end of this weekend. Hopefully, it'll come earlier. But I am going to see if I can get this on tripod somehow. Or oh, we got somebody joining the stream. Welcome. Whoever is joining the stream, welcome. Shout yourself out. I'm going to be talking about the floods, the torrential rainfall that took place in the greater Los Angeles area this week, or rather, these last couple of days. And, you know, for many who have been paying attention to what's been going on in the news, California has dealt with some wild from drought, dealing with wildfires from, you know, you had wildfires in Northern California as well as Southern California. You had them in Butte County, California, where the town of Paradise, California was basically burned down. You had a fire in Malibu, California, where a lot of mountainside was burned down. You also, now we're in the rainy season. This is what's characteristic of California's climate. You have the rainfall patterns being, oscillating. You have a lot of winter rainfall, and then for, spring and summer, you don't get any rain. And what's been happening now we're getting rain. Now we're getting torrential rainfall. And this is going to surprise a lot of people because there are many people who are going to be thinking about the sunshine when they think about California. They're going to be thinking about, beaches. They're not going to be thinking about flooding, torrential rainfall. And yet, thus being winter, it's quite fitting. There will be rain in the winter. However, California is getting all these floods all the time. It's getting all this horrid weather, and or rather the effects of all of this rain. And you're thinking, how could it just flood like that? How could it flood just that easily? You're wondering, how could it flood easily like that? Well, Google Earth is about to come up right now. I'm about to bring up Google Earth. I was messing with this earlier. Obviously, you got Southern California right there. You got the region here. You've got the greater Los Angeles area, San Diego. There were actually pictures from Burbank. There are some pictures from Burbank area. As you can see, it's in the valley. You get a general idea of what I'm talking about. You see this little ping here. You get a general idea of what I'm trying to tell you in terms of, greater Los Angeles area. Now, there are a lot of things that must be understood about flooding. The greater Los Angeles area, a lot of people forget, and I've mentioned this in other videos, a lot of people forget that the greater Los Angeles area is concentrated in a very dry region. A lot of people forget that the desert is next door. A lot of people forget about that because, when people show you pictures of Los Angeles, they show you, palm trees, they show you the ocean, they show you paradise. They don't tell you that of all those palm trees that are being seen in California, most of them were imported. Because even though palm trees do well in Mediterranean climates, California only has one native species of palm tree. One. And I'll get into that later. Another video for another time. But, hold on one moment. I gotta plug this computer in because if I don't, this will die. And I'm back. But as I was saying before, you got a region like Southern California, which has a Mediterranean climate, which has a rainfall pattern where much of its rainfall is concentrated in the winter, and you got the desert next door. Now, why is all of this important? Well, this is why this is very important. This is important to understand because this has a big part to do with why there's so much flooding going on in California right now. This has a big part to do with why California gets flooding in the winter, why Southern California particularly gets a lot of flooding in the winter. Now, you have a situation where it hasn't rained in a while. And then you have to consider some of the areas that are, desert, semi desert. You have to consider, for starters, they're coming through wildfire right now. And, a lot of damage has been done. You got a lot of debris left behind. You got, probably some effects on the soil. And then you also have to think about the soil itself. You get a place, you go to places that are, dry like that. The soil is not going to have as easy a time absorbing rain, especially when you get high concentrations of rain all at once. And with California, they got hit with the Pineapple Express. Now, do not confuse the Pineapple Express with the movie The Pineapple Express. I'm not talking about that Pineapple Express. I'm talking about a storm track. I'm talking about an atmospheric river. You have this atmospheric river where you have this this narrow, dense concentration of moisture just flowing into a few places. And the reason it's called Pineapple Express, it does have something to do with Hawaii. But rather, it has more to do with the waters off the coast of Hawaii. What you have, I'm going to go back to Google Earth for this. Oops. I'm going to go back to Google Earth. I'm going to show. There's Hawaii, and there's California. Basically, you have, bands of moisture and rain coming from off the waters of Hawaii. And what you have is that storm track being blown this way. You have those storms coming from the Pacific. You have that narrow band of moisture just being directed towards Southern California. And just going up and up. And the next thing you know, you're having high, densely concentrated amounts of rain in this area. And a lot of what's to be considered. You have to consider, number one, you're getting large amounts of rain all at once. And then you have to think about how much can the soil handle. You have to consider how much rain can the soil handle all at once. How much? And then you have to think about why all this flooding keeps taking place, why the streets are being turned into rivers. You have to consider a lot. You have to consider just the dense amount of rain that's just hit Southern California all at once. You have to consider it's not just hitting the lowlands and the valleys. You're hitting the mountains as well. You're hitting some of the hills up above. You're hitting the hillier areas. So you've got, the rainwater sort of coming down from the hills as well. You've got all that mess coming down, and it's just causing more problems. So you have to deal with heavy amounts of rain all at once, and then you have to understand in areas where you tend to get dry climates like that, areas like that, you have to consider something. You have to consider that in areas where you've got that, or whatever you have a situation where the weather brings in a dense amount of rainfall all at once, and where you have all that rain hitting hard, and that rain has a hard time absorbing into the soil, you're going to have a lot of problems. You're going to have flooding. You're going to have mudslides. You're going to have a mess everywhere. And then we have to think of some of the debris being left behind, from a dry summer, wildfire. Now, the wildfires were in Malibu, but you have to think about all of those problems that are just taking place, all that combination. You have to think about the land. You have to think about the weather. You have to think about just all of these things coming together and just creating a mess. I got comments here. Do you teach in school? No, I don't. Not yet, anyway. I might do it. I don't teach. I will certainly consider it. I have a degree in geography. I didn't really think about teaching all of that much. I've occasionally thought about it. I might do it. But, you have to consider all the factors that come together. You have to consider the soil, the amount of rainfall that's been taking place. You have to think about when this rainfall has been taking place, how long it hasn't rained. There's a lot to know about Southern California and about California in general that a lot of people don't know. Because, whenever your depictions of California include shows like, and this is nothing against those shows. I like a lot of these shows. Shows like Full House, Saved by the Bell, you know, whenever you have depictions of California like that, it doesn't give you the right impression about California. Whenever they show you California, they show you just the Bay Area or they show you just greater LA, and they typically mostly show you when the sun's shining. They typically show you when everything looks good. They don't show you. Now, granted, Full House did have that episode about the earthquake, and California gets earthquakes. Saved by the Bell had an episode about an earthquake. But they're not going to, if you want to really grasp the geography and if you want to really understand how geography is current, how geography is important in current events, you cannot rely on sitcoms for that. You have to, number one, do the research for yourself. Number two, really pay attention. Really pay attention to what's going on in the news and ask yourself some questions, do more research, find out about that place. Find out how much has been going on there with California. A lot of people don't know that Los Angeles literally sits next to the desert. And that they've been building into the desert for years. And that's a whole other video for a whole other time. I'll get into that. That's another live stream for another time. But what a lot of people don't know. Now, people in the Los Angeles area are going to know this. There are going to be people who do research on these topics that know about this. But there are many people who don't understand. They think, why is it flooding in California? And what are the effects? Well, remember, there are a lot of products that are made in California, that are made in Los Angeles area, that have to be trucked out of Los Angeles to markets further east. And if you happen to get something that comes from California, you might want to think about that. And the reason you might want to think about it, you have to consider there's a storm. It's hit California, it's turned the streets basically into rivers. Guess what can't leave? Trucks. Trucks cannot leave. And we're talking about one of the biggest economies in the United States of America. This is going to cost a lot of money, not just in property damage. It's going to cost some money in property damage, big time. You're going to have a lot of money in property damage, and it's going to be bad. Because you're going to have to, and we're just talking just water damage. Because a couple of inches of water in your house, it's going to be bad. You're going to have water damage alone. But then you also have to consider destruction of buildings, any buildings that get destroyed, any cars that get destroyed. They have to clean up the streets. They have to, just that alone. And then you have to think about how much commerce will be lost. You have to really think about it. You lose a couple of days of commerce simply because, the semi-trucks can't leave because of the weather. That's millions of dollars, that's billions of dollars lost. Because you got products that can't leave simply because the weather is horrible. Or time has to be taken because you're losing time. You can't get time back. So that is a very big concept to understand. it can affect business there, and it could affect like, it could affect business there, and it could affect you if you got to get something from there. You might be sitting in your office or your store, something from California has to come all the way there. It won't get there because the weather is so bad, trucks can't get out. But not only trucks can't get out, trucks can't get to you. And if they can't get to you, money lost. Actually, not just money lost on both ends, time lost. That's a lot of time lost because you've got that failure to travel. So don't think for a moment that something's happening on one side of the United States or anywhere really. Don't think for a moment that just because it's happening far away from you does not mean it can't affect you. Think about this. Suppose you work for a supermarket. Your supermarket has its logistics center, its trucking center, its main center for shipping products in one city. You need supplies from there. You have an ice storm or a snowstorm or something bad happens, and the trucks can't get out. If you run out of supplies at your store, that means you can't get through. And it should be looked at the same way as this storm happening here in California. We got a lot of stuff that can't get out. There's just a lot of damage that's being taken place. A lot of just problems. This is why learning geography is so important. Because anything could affect you anywhere. Just because you're not where it's happening doesn't mean it cannot affect you. Just because you're in New York and it happened in LA doesn't mean it can't hit you up in New York. Because you might have something down in California that you need, but you have to get it trucked up into New York. Or maybe, trucks can't get out. Planes are left grounded because they can't get up. Because, it's too dangerous to fly. That's a lot that needs to be considered. This has been Mark, also known as the Geo Scholar. If you like this stream, be sure to check out my other videos. If you would like to become a Patreon, I have a link in the channel. I have a link in some of my videos. I have a link to my Patreon account if you want to become a Patreon, if you want to help support the channel. And as always, be sure to leave a comment on this video, like, and subscribe. Good night, Lisa J.